AI has huge potential for growth, huge potential for business opportunity. You have seen in the previous presentations. But we cannot unlock these opportunities if people don't trust. If people don't trust the black box. If we keep it a black box, people will not adopt it. And that is what is happening here. So good morning. Thank you very much, especially those who are staying. I know you know that this is the sexiest session in the whole two-day event, because I'm going to talk about the fascinating topic of European regulation. Anyway, apart from this and having to understand my Spaniard accent, thank you for being here. And for those who are here, you will come back today with two important things. Knowing every detail, every secret about the European AI Act, but I'm sure they're going to become firm believers of this law and the need for applying AI governance. First question is, why do we need to regulate AI? Have we done it before? Is that new? And the reality is that this is not new. We have been regulating technology since the very early days of Industrial Revolution. Why? Because every single technology revolution poses challenges, changes the production means, the economics, the society, and therefore we need to introduce new laws. So for the first Industrial Revolution, what happened is that the steam engines, the mechanized production, and the rise of factory made it necessary to regulate the response for that for society. And the outcome was regulating child labor, better working conditions, and also urban overcrowding. You know, the problem when regulating technology is the balance between ex ante and ex post. So if we regulate too much too fast, too early, we can hamper innovation. But if we regulate too late, then probably we cannot revert back the harm or the negative consequences. That is exactly what happened with the Industrial Revolution. The governors had no clue what was the impact in society, and they could not prevent the society upheaval. However, later on in the telecommunications revolution in the 19th, 20th century, the challenge that was prevent monopoly control and need for a standardization. There was the first ever international multilateral organization, ITU, that was already created in 1934, and it is still up today under the umbrella of United Nations. We can also go to the automobile revolution, when the important thing was to regulate safety or environmental emissions. And the recent telecom regulation on 3G, 5G networks, on digital platforms, when we have regulated monopoly, internet neutrality, platforms accountability, and infrastructure development. What happens with AI is that we need to encompass everything. So regulating AI means to prevent social harm, fundamental rights infringement, safety regulations, health regulation, infrastructure, monopoly, and control. And this is why it's a little bit more complex. But what is interesting is to understand why AI today, not the first generation of AI, machine learning, deep learning, but especially today with generative AI and deep agentic AI and the future, physical AI, what makes this time different? What makes this technology different? So you know that computers have always done a thing much better than human beings, which is processing huge amounts of data in a minimum time. We are very bad in processing huge amounts of data, we know that. However, we were much better than machines in three important things: understanding text, understanding images, and understanding and listening to voice. However, we can no longer say this. Machines are already better than humans in image recognition, in reading comprehensions, in language skills, in language understanding, in image recognition. It's not only recognizing images now, it's that the machines can also create new images. So this is why this is so complex and it's so different to any other technology revolution. There are three important things why generative AI specifically is totally different to previous AI or technology revolutions. First of all, is that it affects absolutely all industry verticals. Every single industry will be affected by AI. It will be affected by agriculture, the maintenance, the industry, automobiles, electric vehicles, more intensive or immersive experiences with consumers. It will allow for more personalized treatments with newer technologies. But the first time ever, there is a series of industries that had never been impacted before by technology and that are impacted by the first time, which are the creative industries. Designing or making a picture, writing a song, making a movie. It was something that was still specifically human. And the first time there are machines that are able to replace that. So this is why this is more complex and it has profound implications. The second is, because of this is not only affecting economy, production means, and impacting the vertical industries, it also affects society, because it affects the beliefs and it affects what society, the perception of reality. And we have seen that with deep fakes, with fake news, and with the implications in democratic processes. So when people say that AI is going to pose an existential threat to humanity, it's not that because there's like an Armageddon-type thing that is coming here and kills us all. I mean, the real existential risk for humanity is that we all become insane, because we cannot believe what we see, we cannot believe what we read, we cannot believe what we listen to. And therefore, the important risk here is on trust. Of course, AI poses important threats on cybersecurity, on management of data and privacy, but also in lack of trust for us as a society. And this is why this should be regulated. So there are different efforts, there have been different efforts on regulating AI. And sometimes people mix three important concepts. People mix ethics, governance, and regulation. Especially companies say, why you need to regulate me? I already have an ethical code in my company. Here, there's an example of an ethical code, the Hiroshima G7 ethical guidelines for generative AI development. And also the Biden-Harris administration effort, which is of course no longer valid, that attempted to have a federal framework for AI regulation in the US. And then we come with the AUA Act, which is a firm regulation, as you know, not one different regulation per country, but one comprehensive regulation for the whole 27 EU members. When we talk about ethics, this is something subjective. This is something that doesn't generate any guarantee. This is nice to have, but of course the ethics of Jack Dorsey's Twitter has nothing to do with the ethics of Elon Musk's X. So we cannot depend on one person, one CEO, or one president. We need to have governance. Governance means, what are the instruments I need to put in place to ensure that companies and governments, developers and users are making an ethical use of the technology. And therefore, we need regulation, which is one of these instruments, but it must not be the only one. Regulation is just one instrument for governance, but we can complement that with market incentives, with transparency, with monitoring. So the European AI Act is the first ever comprehensive efforts to provide a comprehensive framework on how to regulate AI. And the important thing, and that's the battle for the narrative, is, listen to me, the EU AI Act does not regulate AI. I repeat, the EU AI Act does not regulate AI. It only regulates the high-risk use cases of AI. So it's a risk-based, product-based matrix. So let's put it in an example. I'm not regulating the hammer. I'm saying if you use the hammer to hang a picture in the wall, that's no problem. But I use a hammer to knock your head and kill you, then you go to jail. So all the questions, why are we regulating technology? Technology is moving, it's evolving. That's no problem. We are regulating the users. And this high matrix classification is very important, because 90% of your use cases are not falling in the high-risk domain. 90% sure. So the important part here, number one, the unacceptable risk, the prohibited uses of AI. That's very important, because it's the first time in any region that we specifically say what we don't want AI to do. And this is more than a legal standard, this is a moral standard. So we're saying, even though something is technically feasible, we don't want this to happen in Europe. What is this? 5 important use cases. Social scoring, like in China, they are using all the data they gather in massive surveillance to classify people in social scoring. And probably if I arrive late to whatever work, probably my kid doesn't have access to a grant, because I'm monitoring you 24/7. So even though it's technically feasible, I don't want this to happen in Europe. Second is predicting predicting policing, sorry, the word. So like it happens in the States, just preventing somebody from crime and using that information prosecute or somebody. So even though that's technically feasible, we don't want to happen in Europe. We don't want to happen in Europe also the fact that the governments can have real-time facial recognition on open spaces, in that I'm in a park, handing hands with somebody, and my governor knows who I am, where I am, I am with, what were my 5 last emails, or where do I live? So we don't want to convert AI into like massive surveillance. And that is very important because people think that AI Act is designed to control companies. I tell you, that is not the objective. And I didn't know that, the disclosure. I am not neutral here because I was the leading negotiator of the European Act. And I was the one to blame. I am the one to blame because it was thanks to the presidency of Spain that this law was approved. So the intention of the legislators, we didn't have the intention to control the companies. We were more interested in controlling the abuse of power and the concentration of power. Concentration of power by monopolies and the abuse of power by governments using AI. So it is important that we know all these 5 use cases, especially, for example, the use of AI manipulating your mind or your will. So there are very specific 5 use cases. This is already enforced. So this law came to force August last year, and 6 months later, any provider of these technologies or these use cases had to put them out of the market. Now we're in a second phase, which is a high-risk use cases. And what is a high-risk use case? Anything that affects physical security, health, and fundamental rights in what we call high-risk domains. These high-risk domains are administrative, judiciary, employment, and education and health. Anything that's out of these domains is not considered by default high risk. And that's the limited risk, which is applications that are not critical areas like chatbots in customer service. We look at transparency obligations, and also large language models, what we call general purpose models and systems. They are not high risk by default, but they can propagate systemic risks in the black box. So if you expect that I am using it, I need to know what's inside the black box. I need to know that you have not infringed copyright. I need to know that you are not using something which is biased or discriminating when I'm developing an app on top of those black boxes. So again, it only focuses on high-risk use cases. That's where the comprehensive regulation takes place. And for that, what we need is like a quality control. It's like what we call compliance. It's 8 points when you need to double-check and you need to really demonstrate that you are complying with. The structure of the law is 13 chapters. The ones you need to look at only is 2, 3, and 4, where exactly this classification and prohibited AI, high-risk use cases, and transparency obligations. And 5 and 6, 5 is especially for big tech, large language models, GPI, general purpose AI applications and systems. And also, the important thing that you need to know is that with the sticks come the carrots. This is not only a regulation to punish, it's a regulation to incentivize adoption, to incentivize innovation in Europe. So all the potential criticism that says that the AI Act is hampering innovation in Europe, that has no basis at all, because it's something that does not affect R&D, so the AI law does not apply to R&D, therefore, does not apply to the pre-development phase. It does not apply to pre-training of models. It only applies when a product is about to be launched commercially. And we have done this in any other sectors. Why do we don't think it's, I would say, sensitive or whatever, makes sense to do that in the software industry? For example, when I go to a restaurant and I ask for a stick tartare, I wouldn't ask for a stick tartare if I wasn't sure 100% that that restaurant has gone through all the health and sanity checks. I would not ask for a stick tartare in a street market. The same way I will not take a pill if I was not 100% sure that was under FDA approval or, the European approval or clinical trials. So why are we so scared in asking the software industry that is replacing us all, is replacing all the vertical sectors to have this level of transparency? I must say that the software community didn't react at all bad on the high-risk use cases and the need for compliance. Everybody thinks that that's good. That generates trust for the customer, and that's like a quality control in the same way when I go to supermarket, I find a food, and I have the ingredients list there, and I decide if I take something which has 200 calories and sugar, but that's my decision, but I know what's there. The question, I would say, or the lobbying action came when we wanted to ask for transparency in large language models. And the question is, when you ask for transparency, nobody wants to give you the transparency. The question is, what are you hiding? So we really believe that we must ask for transparency in large language models. One of the important things of the AI Act is the obligation to mark when something has been developed by AI, even if it's a text, an image, or a voice. Even though I don't care. I mean, probably I need to know if that book has been written by an AI, even though I don't care, because it's perfect for me, it's personalized, it adapts to my, my speech or whatever. But I must know, because otherwise a lack of trust cannot allow for adoption. So key milestones to bear in mind. The two key milestones are the last ones. August 2027, full application of the EU AI Act in the high-risk use cases. 1 year before, large language models, GPIs, transparency rules. What is going to happen in the meanwhile? Some milestones already achieved. First of all, an important part of this is that we're working with the industry to make it happen and to make it easy. So what we developed is codes of practice. This code of practice means that those companies signing those codes of practices, then they can demonstrate that they are applying the law. If you don't sign the code of practice, you are still obliged to apply the law, but it will be much more difficult for you to prove that you are complying. That specifically works for the large language models, big tech. There are two types of regulation authorities. The national authorities, which are responsible to control the compliance on high-risk use spaces, applications that have been deployed in their country. For example, you have an application that it's only deployed in Spain, not in Italy. Then you need to have the authorization of the national AI agency in Spain. So every single country in Europe will have to appoint a national regulatory agency. However, in the horizontal things, which are the large language models, the GPI, the big tech, this is not something that will be controlled nationally, because this is horizontal. That will be controlled with the European AI Office. So the one to knock the door, if you want to have the code of practice approved for your general purpose tool, is the EU AI Office. When you deploy a medical application in Spain or in Italy, in France, you need to go to the national authority. So the code of practice for the general purpose AI systems has already been approved. Most of the big techs have signed it. Everything, mostly all of them except Meta have signed the code of practice. I hope that they will sign it soon. And then the following 2 years are adaptation process. So why this is important and why this is necessary? Because as I mentioned, AI has huge potential for growth, huge potential for business opportunity. You have seen in the previous presentations. But we cannot unlock these opportunities if people don't trust, if people don't trust the black box. If we keep it a black box, people will not adopt it. And that is what is happening here. Really, this is what we are seeing today on the AI investment space, is that everybody's investing in infrastructure, in data centers, in GPUs, in training the models. Nobody is using that mainstream. No single vertical, apart from the B2C platforms on the original big techs that are developing themselves as technology. And the reasons are very simple. You can see them here. Lack of accuracy, cybersecurity potential issues, explainability, intellectual property infringement, regulatory compliance. So if you are two companies and one has a green light because you are complying with the EU right and the other is not, who do you think I would trust better? So it is key that we give trust to the consumer for better adoption. We did that in the past too. Also, there are important implications in the labor space. AI is going to replace workers, especially agentic AI. And we need to prevent that there is no infringement in fundamental rights. And I think that we all should be aware that there are a lot of jobs, as we know them today, that will be absolutely replaced by technology. There are, in fact, 3 different effects in labor. One is total replacement by automation, like agentic AI. In that situation, especially clerical positions, and unfortunately, that affects more women than men globally, because women tend to occupy these type of positions. So the impact that AI is not discriminating certain types of workers, or that AI is protecting labor rights, it is important. So there are 3 effects here. One is when AI is replacing the workers, then we need to do reskilling, because the skills of the human labor will no longer be necessary. Then there's a second effect, which is assist and accompany. How AI can help us do our job better or with better risk. I'm a small company, and I'm SMB, and I have 3 people for customer service, and I can only reach 100 people at a time. Now with AI, we can reach 200,000 people at a time. So that is where AI can help a lot in assisting and complement, and for that we need re-skill. So the skills you have are necessary, but you need to learn new things. And the third important effect, which is the one I trust more, is on augmentation. How AI will help us augment and find new ways and new strategies to do things that we would never do if we didn't have AI. An example is pharmaceutical research. Pharmaceutical research and medical applications are having, an important leapfrog on how fast this is evolving and how cheap this is becoming to develop new drugs or repurposing existing drugs. And that is because these technologies help and approach different way the problem with new strategies. So I think we need to mind these potential impacts also on your companies and in the value chain of the labor market. So I was saying that with the sticks, because the ones who are not do not comply with the EU AI Act will have fines up to 10% of the turnover. So it's something very important if we are not complying with the EU AI Act. But with the sticks comes the carrots. And the carrots is what are the additional incentives that you're putting in place for companies that want to operate or install in Europe. And that's called the AI Continent Action Plan. That has 5 strategic areas: computing infrastructure, data, development of algorithms and adoptions, skills, and how do we simplify bureaucracy. So the first important one is the huge amount of money that the EU is investing in building up computing infrastructure in Europe. So we want to fine-tune AI models. So this infrastructure is for AI inference more than AI training. And we already have 11 AI factories in Europe, and there is a call for tenders this November to apply for 5 AI gigafactories in Europe. So the objective is that we are able to have the capacity to train huge models, multimodal models, and more than 20 billion is being mobilized, but that's going to increase certainly. The other is access to data. The reason why Europe is also an important player in this geopolitical battle against the US and China for the AI supremacy is because nobody can live without a 400 million users market. And the interest now, the AI battle is no longer the AI battle. The AI battle is the battle for data and the battle for the control of energy. And among these data, we're not talking about private data, personal data. We lost it forever. Many years ago. The key part here is industrial data. So the really competitive advantage of Europe is to keep the European industrial data in European soil and to process that through clouds that are based in Europe. And that we keep that under control and sovereignty of European companies and European governments. So there's a lot of now opportunities to create European data spaces for the industries when companies can share data and develop applications and use cases. There's also these AI factories will have data labs. And also the skills are going to be important, not only to keep the researchers in Europe, but also to attract foreign researchers come back to Europe. And that is a program, Choose Europe. 2 important things to take away. This important the initiative is the first ever European regulatory sandboxes framework. So you can join here other companies like yourself and launch your sandboxes before the EU AI Act comes to force. So you can test here what you need to do before the AI Act comes to place. So just, I'm a person who is providing an application in the healthcare sector. What should I do? And that is the way to anticipate to compliance, and also that you have the support of the regulators and the providers and the infrastructure necessary to have these sandboxes before the technology and the regulation come to force. Important that the EU Act also supports innovation through sandboxing, but also what we call real-time testing scenarios. You can apply for a 2-year monitoring in testing something. If I'm testing an autonomous car, I need to test it before I have put all the security measures in place. And where do I test it? So you need to ask to a national regulating body for what we call a testing facility and monitoring for 2 years for a real-time testing scenario. Okay. And the implementing algorithms and adoption, that's called the Apply AI strategy. I would say that Europe's approach is more similar to China than the US. US is more obsessed in the super intelligence piece of the market, while probably China is more interested in the applications in industry and services. I think Europe is tending to do more on the application side and adoption in a strategic critical sector for Europe. And of course, we need to simplify the rules, and this is why I will also like to take note of this important website, AI on Demand. This is access to data set, access to algorithms, and access to research. So you can upload your project here and share it with the scientific community. And last but not least, this AI Act single service desk. So any question you should ask about the AI Act during this 2-year process, I recommend that you knock the door of the AI Service Desk at the European AI Office with the important pieces of information, like the Explorer of the AI Act, just navigating through the AI Act and if that affects your business or not, the compliance checker, just double check that you are complying with the AI Act, and all the national resources you have available. Last but not the least, this is not something that people usually say, but regulating AI is not nice to have, it's a must. We cannot allow that anything that's technically feasible occurs. And we cannot, support technological process at the expense of losing in the process rights and guarantees that has taken centuries to build as democratic societies. There are different approaches here. Not only regulating is important. As I mentioned, we need to have market incentives, as the ones I have mentioned. Not only we can regulate this at a local level, we need to have a global governance of AI. I was myself the co-chair of the United Nations Advisory Body for AI, where we have come for very important recommendations for how to govern AI at a global level. First one that's already been to be implemented is an international and scientific panel for AI. Why? Because we need transparency. The reason why we do not have transparency is because this technology has not been developed by the academia, by the R&D centers. Why is it so? Why this technology has only been developed in the R labs of private companies? Because the academia didn't have the talent? No. Because the academia didn't have the funding? No. Only for one reason, because the academia didn't have access to the massive amounts of data that these data monopolies store. And based on the data monopolies, we are building the AI monopolies. So the next thing that needs to occur is to regulate those monopolies. Have we regulated the railways, or we regulated telecommunications? That will come for sure, because the concentration of power in very few hands is what poses these risks more important to us than ever. So it is important that we have a consensus on what are the opportunities and what are the risks, and why this global AI international scientific panel is putting into motion, and also a global platform of dialogue, because there's a lack of inclusion here. Everything we know about AI has been developed in the global north, with data, training data from the global north, and with computing power from the global north. There is no single supercomputer in the global south. And if you ask a Stable Diffusion, please write somebody or paint somebody drawing something, 100% of the time will be right-handed, and then never will be left-handed. That's in a small example of how biased this data is. So we need to encourage for the adoption of and the creation of more innovation ecosystems. So I really hope that you embrace technology regulation, and specifically the European AI Act, by something that not only is useful for us as citizens, is useful for the next generation, but is useful for you as companies, because that will generate trust and therefore mainstream adoption. So I hope that you come with me, that you embrace regulation, and you make AI good for humanity. Thank you so much.
Carme, thank you so much for joining us here on the stage. It is not often that compliance is made such an engaging topic, so thank you for being here with us. I'm sure there are questions in the audience, but we don't have time for them here on this stage. Folks can join you for an AMA session around the corner,
yes,
down the hall?
1:30, experts panel, ask me anything.
11:30 at the expert stage. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you.